Hey folks, your OS Reviews. You're watching our video look back at the extremely unique HTC One M8 with Windows. So this is the Windows Phone variant running on 8.1 of Windows Phone as opposed to the Android version that we're all used to seeing, and it's much more popular. But other than that, in this video we will discuss whether or not the HTC One M8 series is still worth considering as we slide into 2016, especially now that the HTC 10 has been released. So first of all, we're going to discuss the price. The One M8, at least with Windows version, is now extremely inexpensive. You can pick one up on Amazon.com or on eBay for about $100 or even about $150 unlocked, which is very inexpensive compared to maybe a brand new HTC 10, which might cost, let's say, $600, $800, depending on where you look. That is a significant price decrease. So it's going to be a good option for people looking for a low-cost alternative. At the same time, the One M8 still retains much of the design of the current flagship, the 10, and has a stunning 1080p HD display, which measures in at 5 inches. It's a multi-touch capacitive display, which has an LCD3 technology and also is protected by Corning's Gorilla Glass 3. Otherwise, the phone is still very much a gorgeous piece of hardware with the aluminum finish and the unibody look all around, so it still is something very respectable as far as design is concerned. In terms of specifications, although it's still pretty good, it's no longer the best of the best. However, the Snapdragon 801 chipset coupled with 2 gigs of DDR3 RAM and 32 gigabytes of built-in flash storage is still pretty nice, and it should be fine for most people's needs. You're going to play back a lot of games or do a lot of multitasking. You might experience a little bit more of some slowdown over time, but as far as general performance is concerned, it still is extremely speedy, responsive, and lucid. So not too many issues as far as performance is concerned either. So I will say that if you're considering something like this, which was once a flagship maybe 1 or 2 years ago, as opposed to a brand new phone that was just released but was designed as a budget phone or a mid-end phone, I would recommend that you go for this, which was once a flagship. And that's just because you have a lot more attention to detail with the hardware, and also the specs are still going to be a bit better than a mid-end phone that was released, let's say in 2016, with maybe a Snapdragon 400 chipset. So you still have better value with this overall. As far as other features are concerned, the with Windows version is basically the same as the Android in terms of hardware, but there are a few differences, of course, in the software. But taking a quick look at the hardware tour first, we have the AT&T variant in our hands. There's also a Verizon variant that you could have purchased. And of course, the One M8, just like the One M7 that came before it, has that famous HTC BoomSound speakers on the very top and also on the bottom. Arguably, the One M8 has the best audio quality that people have noted after doing some quick comparisons. It seems to have the loudest speakers and the most rich sounding out of the One lineup, which is certainly good for people who love to watch videos and listen to music. It gets extremely, extremely loud, so if you're playing back some music, everyone can hear it around you in a smaller environment or room. It even can be as good as some smaller Bluetooth speakers, of course. That depends on, of course, whatever speaker you have, but this certainly holds its own, especially as a smartphone speaker. The top features a 5-megapixel autofocus-enabled front-facing camera, and of course the back features the rather controversial dual lens as well as the ultra-pixel sensor, which means it allows the sensor itself to capture a bit more light than, let's say, a traditional smartphone camera, but it only caps in at 4 megapixels, which is, again, a little bit ridiculous considering the front camera has a higher megapixel count or resolution count than the back. However, the images here are not bad at all, especially under low light situations. It does fare a little bit better than maybe a traditional smartphone camera would without that ultra pixel sensor on board. However, again, that low megapixel count is something that people critiqued and HTC addressed in the newer versions of the One, like the 10 as well as the M9. So that is something to be aware of. If you are a photo buff or a photo enthusiast, perhaps the M8 is not going to be the best phone for you. The top, which features the secondary camera, is a depth sensing camera, which allows you to then adjust things like U-focus after you've taken a shot and change the depth of field whenever you want to focus onto a subject or the background, and that tends to work pretty well, even though it does seem a little bit gimmicky, and sometimes we're a little bit dubious of whether or not it's the software doing the job or if it's the hardware doing the job. But regardless, it's a nice design implementation, and we've also seen that on the new Huawei P9 series, so that is something that is coming back. We have the HTC logo with the Windows Phone logo down beneath, and also the AT&T logo as well. The very slick back has tapered edges, which kind of melt into your hand, and it feels very sleek and elegant and premium, of course, with that one-piece design. And there's also on the sides here access to the SIM card tray. And on the other side, we have access to the micro SD card slot tray for expanding the memory, as well as a dedicated volume rocker that's very tactile and responsive. And down below here, the 3.5mm headphone jack and a standard micro USB for charging and syncing information. And the very top features the power on-off switch, as well as an IR blaster, which allows you to control your television set or a DVD player set with your phone. And that works nicely. This is also a feature that the 10 cuts out, so it's something that the M9 has a leg up in this department. Now, we're not fans of the placement of the power key. We're still not fans of it. Even now, after 2 years, the top, it's kind of difficult to hit just because the phone with a 5-inch display and that added dimensions from the BoomSound speakers just makes it a very tall phone overall. So hitting the top key, unless you have very long fingers, becomes a bit of a challenge. And we do like how HTC has gradually moved the power key to the sides, but something you won't get here with the M8, unfortunately. Also, the entire display, even though it is pretty durable, is a huge fingerprint magnet, as you can see here. It's already covered in a layer of fingerprints after we cleaned it a few moments ago. Now, the One M8, even with Windows, does have double tap to unlock, just like the Android variant, but you can't double tap again to put it back to sleep, unfortunately. But otherwise, Windows Phone, it is a different experience than Android. It's more geared for productivity folks, for corporate users who want better Exchange email support, but of course don't want as much, let's say, entertainment applications or entertainment apps in general. It still is lacking in that department, but otherwise, it is a very usable, I would say, operating system. It's leaps and bounds better than any Windows mobile phone platform we've seen, and HTC has added some of their touches on here as well. So that includes things like Blinkfeed and Zoe, but those are integrated as specific apps as opposed to something built directly onto the home screen. So it's no longer as non-evasive as it was on the Android variant. And also, something I don't really love about the Windows Phone version is that the tiles in general take up a bit of black border space. Like, they have a design where there's a black border, which makes the bezel seem wider than it really is, when in fact the bezels are quite small. Something I do like about the One M8, though, on here with Windows, is there is an option for you to hide the bar on the bottom with the back key as well as the Windows home key, which is something not found on every single Windows phone out there, and it's a nice little extra that we did appreciate. Overall, a very simple, very streamlined and elegant user interface, and I think it should please most users, again, especially at this now reduced, fairly low price point. So taking a quick look at some other things, there is a drag down notification drawer that you can access your Wi-Fi settings, Bluetooth settings, GPS settings, airplane mode, rotation lock, and tap on all settings to go into the phone full menu. One of the more interesting things with Windows Phone 8.1 is Cortana. That is the digital voice assistant, which is comparable to Siri on an Apple device, or on Android there are a lot of third-party solutions that you could download through the Play Store, and this does a respectable job if you want to ask things like the weather, or to search up something quickly, to send a quick text message or call someone, and it's fairly accurate, although it's definitely not as witty or as sharp as Apple Siri at the moment. It seems like the responses are a bit more limited. If I ask something maybe in a more playful manner, let's say, what's your name, when were you born, it seems like Cortana gets a bit more of a robotic response, or it searches something up through the internet as opposed to giving me something that seems more human or alive. But regardless, it does work pretty well, and it's a nice option as well. Microsoft does require you to sign in with an email that you can create. You can also create an account the first time that you get the phone to access all the full functionalities on board. Now, one of the reasons why you might want to consider the Windows Phone variant is for that productivity aspect, and all Windows phones, just like on Windows Mobile, comes included with the Microsoft suite of Office apps. So if you want to tap on this, you can quickly create a pocket version of PowerPoint, of Excel, of Word, and Publisher, things like that, which are pretty useful to have if you do consistently work on the go. And the 5-inch screen on the One M8 is a gorgeous display. It has very wide viewing angles, the display is bright and vibrant, saturated, and viewable under some sunlight, and so it remains a great portal for you to access your productivity needs. So let's tap on something like a sample application or a sample presentation. using the accelerometer here, we can see that we can edit things quickly, go through different slides, change different headings, and easily input your text. Speaking of, the built-in keyboard is the same as stock Windows Phone, so it makes text entry pretty easy and fast as well as responsive. You don't get a lot of misses either, and you can switch to a wider orientation if you want to type on something a bit more comfortably. And overall it does a respectable job, although I will say it is a pretty tall keyboard. I wish there was a way to more easily adjust the height of the keyboard, because it takes up a bit more of a screen real estate than, let's say, an Android counterpart would. But there is predictive text if you want to turn that on, and there's also the built-in swipe gestures, and that is something new. So it does offer quite a few customization options now, and we are fans of the overall feel as well as performance of that virtual keyboard. So taking a look at some other apps built on here, it's basically the same deal with most Windows Phone 8.1 devices. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the HTC One M8 with Windows Phone is going to be upgradable to Windows Phone 10, which is a bit surprising considering the top-of-the-line specifications. Again, that Snapdragon 801 processor, 2 gigs of RAM. As far as Windows 8.1 phones are considered, this is basically one of the best in terms of flagship specifications. So it's a bit of a shocker to us that it's not going to be upgraded to the latest operating system when phones like the Lumia 635, let's say, with a Snapdragon 400 chipset will get that update. So it's something that we hope Microsoft might change their mind on, but it is one of the reasons why you might want to hold off or consider, let's say, the M9 instead of the M8 or the M8 with Windows version. Other built-in apps include a Skype client, of course, also owned by Microsoft now. The store, which is again pretty limited in terms of apps that you get. You have access to Sync Exchange or your calendar, as well as music and videos. It kind of borrows from that whole Zune ecosystem that we saw a few years ago. There's a weather application, sports, news application, all very familiar if you used a modern Windows computer, Windows 8 or Windows 10. You should be right at home here with the tile interface. So taking a look at the camera next, again, it's not the best aspect of the phone, I will say, but it does tend to focus in subjects pretty nicely, and the interface is nice and clean. It's a traditional HTC interface that we've come to expect and we've come to like as well. You can see that it's very fast to focus, and you can quickly tap on the shutter key there to take a shot, and it does respond very, very quickly, which is one of the highlights of this particular camera. You can also slide left to right from the edges of the screen to switch to the front-facing camera, and you can see that the front-facing camera does have a pretty wide field of view and does a nice job as well. The phone itself does not have optical image stabilization because HTC said that with the dual lens setup they had no additional space to put that in. It does have some virtual software settings, but it's not as great, and your video settings are capped at 1080p HD, which is still pretty good, and you can view it back in nice detail, especially with this gorgeous display, but it's not 4K resolution or anything like that. Tapping on the bottom here, you have access to some standard things like changing some filters, lenses, panorama, taking a selfie now, or recording video. So very simple, and of course you can launch into more advanced settings as well if you want to go into that. So taking a look at the shot that I just took, you can see that you can pinch and zoom into your shots very easily, and overall it makes for a pretty nice and enjoyable experience. Again, this is something that was captured in a relatively low light shot, but it still does a nice job. Obviously, it's not the best camera on a smartphone on the market, especially with that low megapixel count, but it also isn't a slouch. And again, at this reduced price point, it isn't anything to complain about, at least in our opinion. When it comes to call quality, which is still the most important aspect of any smartphone, no matter how much it can do, we still think the HTC One M8 does a very good job. Reception is strong, at least with AT&T here in the Seattle area, and the overall performance of the speakerphone is loud, as you'd expect with that awesome BoomSound experience, and there's also noise cancellation. So if you're in a noisier environment, like on a marketplace, it will kind of tune out the background sounds and the speaker will only be hearing your voice, which is great. So overall, a very good call quality experience. In terms of battery life, it does do better than the Android variant, and that's probably because Windows Phone is still a bit more optimized. It's a bit more light in terms of the user interface than Android. You don't get to customize as much graphically intensive stuff, so you have a bit better performance in that aspect. I got roughly 2 to 2.5 days of usage out of this before I needed to recharge it, depending on how much I browse the web and how much videos I watch, but that is better than the regular One M8 with Android. I had to recharge it basically at the end of every day, but that's about average and to be expected with a flagship device with top-of-the-line specs that was released, again, a year or two back. So pretty good in terms of battery life performance. And otherwise, you do have some AT&T bloatware on here, which is inclusive of AT&T Family Map, Locker, Navigator. You can, of course, use your own GPS services like Google Maps, which is free. And there's also Amazon App Store on here as well. Latest versions of Windows Phone does allow you to gradually install some other applications from Android and move that over. That support will be coming, so that is something to note. And otherwise, you do have a built-in Facebook client, Twitter client that you don't have to install yourself. You have access to some Microsoft supported games. In terms of health and fitness, you can use the pedometer to kind of measure your steps. It does have Bluetooth, so you can connect it to other smart wearables and track your movement, although again, app support is still kind of limited with the Windows Phone platform at the time. There is support for HTC.View, which is pretty nice, so if you have access to the case, it will work, and you can see the kind of funky .view-like experience when you are having the case closed. You can still kind of access your notifications and whatnot. Taking a look at the HTC Photo Edit application, you need to use this for using or taking advantage of the depth field sensor. So taking a look at some shots that I took using this software suite, this is a 3D printed Eiffel Tower, and you can see the background is kind of fuzzy, blurred out, which is kind of the effect I was going for, but this is just created by naturally the camera and tapping to focus, but this is a filter that I applied using the HTC app. You can see that it creates kind of a shadow background in the back. This is one where I tapped on the specific point on the bottom here to focus in, and the back has been blurred out even more, as you can see there. So it does create a pretty compelling experience, and it is worthy of your social media networks if you want to post it there. And here is some other filters that you could play around with. Here's a snow filter, some other funky things that are kind of nice, but also a little bit gimmicky, I suppose, after a while, but a decent experience overall, and something that we're glad to be seen on this particular product. So that is the photo taking and editing experience built in. There's an FM radio. You do need to plug in a pair of headphones to access that. The aforementioned HTC Blinkfeed, which is a service that takes in all of your various social media alerts, notifications. It's kind of like Blinkfeed and puts it into one place. But again, it's not integrated into the platform directly. It's more like an app. There is Microsoft Maps, not as great as using a Google Map in our opinion, but it is there. Podcast, settings, travel, video highlights, wallet. This phone does have NFC on board, but it does not have wireless charging. Just something to quickly note and point out. It's also not waterproof either, so it's not going to be as rugged or resistant as some 2016 phones tend to seem. So basically that's it as far as the main features and specifications on here are concerned. The built-in browser here, again, Internet Explorer, is not bad anymore. It's been significantly updated through the years, and so now it's pretty fast, even though it isn't as good as Chrome. It does load pages relatively quickly, and it seems to do a respectable job nonetheless. So if we wanted to look up something like the New York Times, let's take a look at how quickly a more complex site will load. It's going to try to load the mobile site, but if we scroll all the way down, we are connected using Wi-Fi at the moment. The reception in terms of the antenna seems to be quite good. And there we go, we are loaded. So some glitches, sometimes it's not going to fully load, but you can see that all in all it does a good job, and text reflows as you scroll back and forth through the page. So not a bad web browsing experience, of course, and of course you can still see all the images and graphics, as well as some animations as you interact with the page, and the sharp display definitely helps here. So a pretty good experience. Of course, if you're multitasking, opening up too many tabs, playing back too many 3D intensive games as well, things might get a bit more sluggish and will slow down. But overall, not too bad. And again, the 801 processor is still pretty good as we slide into 2016. So at the end of the day, the HTC One M8 with Windows, I'd say this is still a pretty good phone. That's just because the price point is low enough at this time. Picking one up at Amazon for, again, $100 if you get it used is a very good deal, because even if you look at a mid-end phone that's released now, I don't think it's as powerful or as sleek feeling or as good looking in terms of the hardware as the One M8 is. The One M8 with Android is still, I think, a better phone overall, just because it has a more flexible user interface and you can do a bit more with the software. However, it does cost a little bit more, so it's not as budget conscious as the One M8 with Windows seems to be at the time, and both phones have the same hardware as well as specifications. Anyways, this has been a quick video look back, as well as discussion of whether or not this phone is still worth it here in 2016. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been the HTC One M8 with Windows.